Guys, if you're interested in what gear I'm using to get good video while riding my motorcycle, maybe this video is for you. What's up, my biker friends, and welcome back to another video. Let's talk about camera gear, specifically the camera gear that I use on the motorcycle to capture all the videos while I'm riding on the motorcycle. Now, if you've seen some of my videos, you know I'm using two cameras. I have not always used two cameras. I started with a single camera, and that's the camera I'm going to introduce to you first. And I'm going to talk about the second camera that I use, why I use that specific one. They're very different cameras, and they have very different sort of pros and cons. And it's actually a good mix for me to having both of these. Let's start with the first camera that I ever got, and that is the Sony FDR-X3000. Now that camera is ancient by today's standards. I think the GoPro Hero 10 is around the corner. This came out when the Hero 5 was out. Now it's almost 5 generations older than the GoPro cameras. When this camera came out, it had the best image stabilization on the market. It would provide a 4K image at 30 frames per second. GoPro Hero wasn't that far. Now with the next generations, and especially with the Hero 7, GoPro kept up and actually now has excellent image stabilization, even better than this camera. But what I'm using it for on the helmet, the image stabilization, especially the optical stabilization, is more than enough. This camera has a few advantages for me. One of the main advantages is it's the form factor of that camera. If you look at it, you can see it's a really slim profile when it's mounted to the helmet. It's one of the main benefits of having a camera to the side mount of the helmet. I like the viewing angle from the side. I don't really like having a camera on top of the helmet. That's too high up and it looks kind of goofy when you ride around. A very popular spot is actually the chin bar, especially when you mount a GoPro camera, because the form factor of a GoPro camera, I actually got one here. If you're looking at the GoPro camera, it's actually up front here. That's actually a very favorable place to put it. Sometimes, so if you really have a high windshield on your motorcycle, it is actually quite difficult to get a good enough viewing angle. You sometimes are too low. And most of what you're filming now is actually the inside of your windscreen. You want to be filming above the windscreen. So having something at eye level gets you a sort of a natural perspective to see what the rider sees. So that's why I still prefer having a side-mounted camera. You can do the same with a GoPro camera, but you have to use a lot of these adapters and the camera kind of sticks out really far. If you're using this camera, you don't have the issue of having, a camera that sticks out quite a bit. That's one of the main advantages of the camera. One reason why this Sony camera mounts so flush to the helmet is because I'm not using any of the official mounting brackets that came with this camera or any other camera. Actually, if you take a closer look, the camera is just mounted using Velcro. It's just a Velcro that's sitting on both sides. It's actually dual lock by 3M. It's very similar to Velcro, just a bit stronger, and has never fallen off. So it's a very, very simple way of mounting it flush to the side of a helmet. Also, this helmet has specific mounting points. So you can, at this side, this is just a sort of curvy mounting plate, but you can get a flush mounting plate. It makes it much easier to mount something to the side of the helmet. This is a Touratech Aventura Carbon first series helmet. So that's another advantage of having this specific camera. I had to basically glue shut the display that's on the camera. I don't ever use it. I don't change the settings on this camera. I use the smartphone app to do any of the changes, but I just keep the same settings basically most of the time. There's other advantages that the camera has. It actually provides a direct input. It's a 3.5mm microphone jack. All the other action cameras that are on the market, most of them at least, that have 4K and that are at the top tier, the DJI Osmo Action or any of the GoPro Hero cameras, they need an adapter in order for you to plug in an external microphone. You need an external microphone if you want to record your voice or if you want to just record motor sound. Built-in microphones on a motorcycle will not work at all. It's going to just be wind noise. You're not going to record any proper sound. So that's another huge advantage of having this in here. Now this camera has another advantage that I've just learned after I put it on here, because the battery compartment is on the side like this. So it's really easy for me to just kind of flip open the battery compartment. I don't have to unmount it, take it out of a cage. I can actually even keep the helmet on and swap out a battery and put a battery in here. It's a huge advantage because, it eats batteries, not as fast as GoPros, but, every hour and a half, you have to change the battery out. If you don't want to take your helmet down, you can do that and just kind of change the battery out. I think that was a huge advantage. If you're looking at GoPro cameras, you always have the cage, and even with the modern ones, you still need to unmount them in order to get to the battery compartment, depending on how you have your camera mounted. Now, there are a few accessories that I use with that action camera. One of the most important ones with picture quality is actually the ND filter. That's basically the dark glass that you see up front here. And unfortunately, the camera didn't come with a threaded piece, so it's actually a custom milled part. I found a guy on eBay that actually specifically for the camera made a part so I can put a 37mm standard filter on the front. I usually use ND8 filters. I use ND8s on the GoPros and on this camera. And with that little adapter, I don't know how much it cost. It was 20 or 30 euros. It's from Latvia, I think. I'm gonna leave the link in the description if I can still find it. But it's really nice and having that filter in there. The other thing that I use is an external microphone. Now I started off using just one microphone because I was interested in recording just the engine sound, the clean engine sound going into the camera. Now there are several ways of doing it, but if you want the sound to go into the camera, you need an external microphone, and ideally you place it outside the wind. You can put it in your helmet. What I did is actually route the cable to a back pocket in my jacket where I have a microphone sitting. Then I started getting interested in also recording voice in the helmet, and I wanted voice and engine sound at the same time. So what I'm using here is a stereo splitter. So the microphones that you're using are mono signal microphones that use the little lavalier microphones, everything, these tiny ones. Those are mono microphones. So the splitter actually splits the signal. So on the left channel, I have the audio signal. On the right channel, I have the motor signal. And when I'm in my editing software, I can basically mix those two channels. I can actually make them stereo channels and have sort of 4 tracks that I can use then. So it's a really easy way of recording both motor and engine sound, and that's what it looks like. It's a really simple piece. It's the splitter that's now connected to the helmet, and you see the microphone is already plugged in. The microphone that goes to the helmet, and then when I put on the helmet, I plug in the microphone that goes to the back pocket of my jacket that records the engine sound. Now I had a hard time finding the right microphone setup. When I first started doing the setup, I used an old microphone from a Bluetooth communication system. I think it was a Cardo system or something. So they make microphones that are specifically made to go into a helmet. So I thought this was actually a good idea, a good design to put in the helmet, but somehow it didn't work. I always had distortions and somehow the signal was clipping. And I first thought it was just the camera not being able to get the levels right, and it was just peaking. I was reading a lot about it on the internet. Others had similar problems, and then was experimenting with different microphones. And I also came across an article as someone that is not a sound specialist. It took a while to get to the point of understanding how these microphones work, and I still have a very superficial understanding of how they work. But one thing caught my eye, and that is actually the maximum sound pressure level that these microphones are rated for. Now, most microphones are rated in the range of 110 or 120 decibels. We can easily get noises, wind noises that exceed the 120 decibels in the helmet. You know, most of you guys that go a bit faster know that. It gets really, really noisy in the helmet. Now, if you have a microphone that has a sound pressure level, max sound pressure level of less than that, there's a chance that the distortions are just coming from the microphone because it's not picking up the sound properly. It's not really your camera. So I was looking for small lavalier microphones with higher sound pressure levels. It's actually really difficult to find those. So the cheapest one I could find is actually made by Sennheiser. It's the Sennheiser MKE Essential Omni-Black. It's almost 200 euros in price, which is relatively expensive for a microphone you just stick into your helmet. There's lots of cheaper options, but it's the first one that actually comes with 140 decibels at least, I think, in sound pressure, max sound pressure level. So you're not getting 140 dBs in your helmet. So I figure if I put this microphone in to record speech, then the wind noises that are getting into the helmet are not distorting the microphone signal. The issues that I had with all the other microphones is that once I picked up speed, signal would be crap, somewhere around 50, 60 kilometers an hour sometimes, depending on wind. Now with this Sennheiser microphone, I can go quite a bit faster and I can still get a clearer sound. I mean, if you're going 120, there's lots of wind in your helmet, it's going to degrade the sound quality. So if you want clean sound, you have to go a bit slower if you want to speak into the microphone. But this gives me a bit more range now to work with, which is really, really nice. Now, the second microphone that I'm using, I also upgraded that. I had a cheap lavalier microphone. I actually upgraded to a Røde Lavalier Go microphone. That's about 60 euros. Still not a cheap lavalier microphone. That has a lower sound pressure level, but because it's sitting in the back pocket, I have it cushioned in some sound absorbing material and then put it in my pocket in order to get the crackling noise out of it. That seems to be enough. And especially in combination on the stereo splitter, that seems to be a pretty workable setup. Now, it was a lot of trial and error. I can't really tell you why it works. I just can tell you for me, with this setup, this camera, seems to be a very good setup. And now I get pretty good sound quality straight into the camera. Now let's talk about the other cameras that I'm using. Those are GoPros. I actually have two of these. Now these are still the Hero 7. I know there's a Hero 9 out already. The cameras have started to get bigger now with GoPro. The Hero 8 wasn't really a very good camera for us motorcycle riders. I don't know if you know, but the filter that's up in front here, I have these ND filters that I've put in. Those are Polar Pro ND filters, and you can just swap them out for the original filter that's on the GoPro. Now with the Hero 8, they've done away with the filter, so you couldn't actually attach a different filter to the camera, which made no sense. GoPro changed it now with the Hero 9, where you can still take the filters off again, which is good, so you can mount your filters or different lenses and stuff, but the camera has really gotten a lot bigger. So I'm still sticking with the Hero 7s. I have two of these. I managed to crack the rear display screen in both of these. They still work. Now, if you see my back images, you'll probably see me having the GoPro mounted to this sort of flex arm. This is actually a GoPro original part. It comes with these jaws, like a clamp. And that's where the camera goes in. It actually goes into the casing here. Goes in here and basically lives on the handlebar. And it lives on the handlebar and just it's pointing at me most of the time. So when I'm using the camera, this is my B camera filming me from the front. But also it allows me to take it off, take the camera off the bike, and then I can sort of move the camera around my left hand and film freehandedly. Also, I use the GoPro cameras to mount in different locations on the motorcycle. And the reason why this camera works better than the Sony is the better image stabilization when it comes to high frequency vibrations. Now these cameras with the digital image stabilization are better suited for micro vibrations or high frequency vibration that you would see on a motorcycle. The optical image stabilizer of the Sony doesn't really handle those high frequency vibrations really well. I tried that initially in some of my first videos that you see when I mounted the camera somewhere else. You've got a lot of shake in the picture. So that's where the limits are on the optical stabilization. On the helmet, it doesn't matter, but on the rest of the motorcycle, it does. So this is where it works really well. Also, the form factor is not really good for the helmet, but it's good for everything else. So if you want to mount it, to the front of the bike, you want to mount it on different parts on the bike, the form factor of these action cameras makes a lot more sense than the sort of camcorder style form factor that the Sony offers. Now, these are the things I like about the GoPro action cameras. There's a lot of things that are not to like. And one of the major gripes that I have with this camera is somehow GoPro doesn't seem to support the products really well. If you look at other products, if you look at Sony, if you look at DJI, they bring out firmware updates and figure some of the issues that very likely the firmware software is causing. So I've got a lot of crashes of videos on this camera, up to a point where half the videos on a micro SD card are unusable. It records the first part of the video, keeps recording the audio, but then the image quality or the image itself, the video image, it just freezes into place. And you don't know when that happens because there's no error message. It just records the video, and then when you get home and you want to look at the video, all that image quality is gone. And now I have two GoPros, they both do the same thing. I don't know what the issue is. I've never had an issue with this on my Sony camera, or any other DJI cameras that I have. It's only GoPro's Hero cameras. Pretty unreliable. They're great when they work well, and they suck when they don't keep recording the video. So it's a love and hate relationship at the moment. It's the best thing out there. So if you're asking the other alternative that's out in the market, the DJI Osmo Action, I actually looked at that camera too. And it pretty much fits the bill of an extra camera that you could use on the motorcycle. There's just one thing that keeps me from buying the camera, and that is the wide angle lens. The GoPro has a much wider angle and a much wider angle of view, and this is exactly what you need on a motorcycle because the camera is so close to you that you want the camera to have a really wide angle lens. If you look at the Osmo Action, it's not as wide of a lens, and that's the main reason why I'm not looking at DJI. I'm hoping that we see a next iteration of the Osmo Action, and maybe DJI finally has a product to keep up with the GoPro Hero lineup. Anyway, guys, this wraps up the video on the cameras that I use on the bike. So still my old and trusty X3000 Sony camera, it's still sitting here. It's a very good chance gonna see the next season as well, once I'm riding again. And of course, I'll be using my Heroes until something else comes out to the market. These cameras still do the job. Now I have two of them. So they're still the best thing that I have at the moment. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this useful. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Leave your comments in the comment section, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, ride safe and stay outside.